promised to hold the department accountable to the highest standards of our profession. And I promised that I would always do the right thing, especially when it was difficult. And today is one of those days. Saturday night, one of our officers shot a man near 1078 Rice Street. He wasn't wearing clothing, and he had no possessions. Thankfully, that man survived and is recovering at Regions Hospital. And thankfully, none of our officers were physically harmed during this incident. This all happened during a tense call involving more than a dozen police officers and a person wanted for violent crimes, including criminal sexual conduct, kidnapping, and aggravated assault. Calls like this are incredibly complex. They involve multiple agencies, victims, and facts. Most of the time, these calls end without incident. On Saturday night, that wasn't the case. Two things happen after an officer shoots someone. The BCA conducts a criminal investigation, and we, the St. Paul Police Department, conduct a thoughtful and detailed review while asking ourselves some very important questions. These questions are, was the force in line with our policies and training? Was it reasonable? Was it necessary? And did the force reflect our department values? Unfortunately, an officer fell short of those standards on Saturday night. And as a result, I have taken swift, decisive, and serious action to address this incident. It was an action guided by our values, our policies, and the promise I made when I became Chief of Police in the city of St. Paul. And while state law prevents me from saying what action I have taken, I can tell you that's in the best interest of both our community and in the best interest of our department. I've spent the past few days reviewing the facts of this case, our policies, and the body-worn camera video from the scene. Some of the video I'm going to play for you now. Over to your right, my left.
Get out of the dumpster and get on the ground. Joseph, come on out. Climb out of the dumpster. There you go. Don't run! Get down!
So as you can see, this video is incredibly difficult to watch because I know lives have been altered. A person has been shot. A community is feeling the effects of an officer-involved shooting. An officer who has served honorably in the past has had his life changed forever. And when I ask myself if the officer's actions on Saturday night were reasonable and necessary, the only answer I can come up with is no. As police officers, we have a duty to use force only when required. We must balance the risk to our community, our colleagues, and to ourselves. Wearing the badge of the St. Paul Police Department is a privilege and it's an honor, and it comes with great responsibility and authority. That authority can only be granted by the community we serve. My job as your chief is to hold this department accountable to the tough standards, the high standards of the St. Paul Police Department for our community, as well as the officers who have the honor of wearing this badge. Today, that's what I'm doing. And in closing, I want to say two things. To our community, I want you to know the women and men of the St. Paul Police Department, our officers, our sergeants, commanders, civilians, my executive leadership team who are with me today, we are entirely committed to delivering trusted service with respect. We're committed to transparency, accountability, and living the values and doing what's right every day and without exception. To our officers within the St. Paul Police Department who serve this city with grace, humility, and bravery, know that the commitment I made to you on day one remains in stone. If your actions are reasonable and necessary, I will always have your back. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mayor Carter, who will say a few words. Again, thank you for your being here today, and thank you for your time. I'm sorry, at this point, I'm not legally allowed to answer any questions, but thank you very much for the question.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you all for being here. And I want to thank you specifically for your ongoing partnership and the leadership of our St. Paul Police Department and for our entire community and city. This is clearly not a happy occasion that brings us together. But one thing I know that we all agree on is that we owe our community, our residents, and our officers the highest standard of professionalism, of accountability, and of transparency at all times. That's a standard that our St. Paul Police Department has been known for. It's a standard we are known for, and it's a standard that we will forever be known for. We know that we send our officers into some tough circumstances. We know that they work hard, serve us well, and they have a tough job. That job is only made tougher if our community members have any doubt of that high bar, that high standard we hold ourselves to. That's why our continued work in St. Paul, that's why our partnership is so critically important. That's why we're working closely to ensure the safety of our city, to envision our approaches to public safety, and ensure that our entire community knows that we hold ourselves accountable to the highest levels of accountability and transparency. My heart is with everyone involved in this tragic scene. My heart is with the officers on scene and every member of our St. Paul Police Department families whose lives, whose work is impacted. My heart is with our community members who see this video and will inevitably have to process the trauma of seeing something like this play out in our community. And my heart is with our leaders, both Chief Axtell and all of us, as we chart the path forward for our community. I appreciate the level of accountability. I appreciate the level of transparency. As we know here in St. Paul, we have taken that seriously. And as we've had officer-involved shootings in the past, we have sought to, in the full interest of transparency, to get a video out to make sure that people can understand fully what happened. And I appreciate your dedication to that level of ongoing transparency. The trust that flows between our community members and our law enforcement officers is sacred, and we owe it to all of us to protect, to prioritize, and to strengthen that trust at every possible turn. I thank you, Chief Axtell, for doing that today, even when that's not easy to do. This is work that my administration will continue in partnership with Chief Axtell, with our officers, and with our community. And to all of those who join us in this work, we stand with you in building this pathway forward for our city and for all of us. Thank you.